Alright, here we are on the second part of the assembly video. This is loading the machine, just giving you an idea here of what we're in for, and this is 64 times normal speed. So let's begin. Okay, note the location of the missing gear. That's the best spot to have the missing gear. And we're going to always turn the crank clockwise, the main drive wheel clockwise, unless we're backing up. And then our first bobbin goes in, it's a clockwise bobbin, and we're going to skip one space on the opposite wheel, and then put our first counterclockwise bobbin in. Now we're going to jump over to the clockwise side and skip one space and put another bobbin in. And we're always going to skip one empty space from the leading bobbin to the one that we're putting in. So notice the spaces that we've skipped. Now I'm just going to run them around the wheel to make sure that they don't collide with one another. That'll mean that they're in the right spots. They pass each other. A note here, you can see I'm having difficulty moving them, and that's because the gears don't like to be empty. They ride up on one another when they're empty. When all the bobbins are in, they're in much better shape. So we're back to the very beginning, right where we were. We want to keep the rhythm going of one skipped space on each side, and then place the bobbin. And we're going to do all 16 of the bobbins here. One other trick is, if you ever have trouble with the machine not wanting to move, you can kind of wiggle individual bobbins. There's usually one culprit. Or you can also press down the gear so it rests flat against the deck. If you see one that's kind of raising up towards the platform, that's always the problem, or almost always the problem. The other one possibility is if you're having persistent trouble, it's very possible that the indexing of one of your islands or one of the cams is incorrect, and you can see there's little hash marks on each of them to line them up, and they have to be nearly perfect for the machine to work well. That's always going to be a problem. If any of them are loose, they can be rotating, or they can be slightly out of adjustment. That means it's pinched on one side or the other. We're getting to the very last bobbin here, not quite the last one, and what you want to be very careful of, here's the last bobbin that we can put in at this point. There's actually one remaining bobbin, but we're going to get them just so the last two bobbins are at the very last point that they can be captured by the track, so they don't fall out. And then we're going to place the gear, the final gear. This gear has to be placed so the slots line up with one another, and this is kind of hard to do. It's actually a little bit of a game of chance to get it the first time. You just try to line them up the best you can so the slots are on the exact tooth that they need to be. And then I put the shaft in just enough so I can verify by going back and forth that the bobbins are able to enter and leave that single wheel. I just verified it, so I'm ready to now install the very last bobbin. To do this, we're going to have to loosen two of the screws on the deck, the outer ring of the deck, just so we can lift it up about 1/8 of an inch, and just a little bit of a flex, and pop that last bobbin in the outermost slot on the missing wheel. And then we return the cam island and put the screw in. I'm going to drive the screw into the hole, and we will still have to put a nut on the back of it and tighten it down. Now I flip the machine over and put the nut on the final gear, and we're going to tighten it up and make sure that the hash marks are perfectly aligned, and give it a tighten. This is difficult sometimes because the island wants to twist as it tightens, and we don't have the ring to keep everything in place like we did when we were putting the other cam islands on. So you just have to do it a couple times sometimes to get the hash marks to line up perfectly. Just want to make sure everything's nice and tight, because when the cams rotate, it's not a good thing. So we're just going to do a couple spins and make sure that everything is functioning, and then we're going to put some canola oil. I like canola oil because it is just a safe substance and it's easy to clean up, and that really reduces the friction on the whole machine. So after a couple spins around, realigning a couple of the islands a little bit and some canola oil, the machine really kind of wears in a little bit and will get smoother. Now it's time to load some bobbins, and we're going to use these little tension tabs. They bend very easily. You don't want to bend them at the point of the holes. You want to bend them in the meat of the material, because the holes can actually be a little bit brittle from the laser cut. I'm not very good at threading small things, but we're going to thread from the bottom up and then down through the middle hole and back up through the last hole, and that's going to create just enough tension and friction on the thread to kind of tighten up the rope braid. And there are a number of ways that you can thread these tension tabs. You can come from the bottom and go to the top, and you can just experiment with a bunch of different ways to create more friction if you want it, or less friction if you want less friction. It just depends on what your end result is with the rope. Again, I'm bending it, just kind of using my thumbnail as a fulcrum and giving it a couple bends and threading this one too. The reason we're bending the tabs up in the first place is the tab helps to hold the thread up in the air so it doesn't catch one of the interior bobbins as it goes past. And then also providing the tension, which is very important in making rope, to have the right tension. I like to make sure every tab is threaded the exact same way and every bobbin is going the same direction, whether it be clockwise or counterclockwise. To secure the bobbin, we're going to use two 5/16 nuts, and they're going to be jam nutted against each other, which is, we put the first nut on and we want the bobbin to actually be loose, always loose. The tension we want to be provided by the tab and not by the actual rotation of the bobbin. So we put the first 5/16 nut on, and then a second one right on top of it, holding the first one perfectly still with the wrench and using a socket to tighten the second one against it. Alright, well, I hope this gets you started on your rope making projects, and thank you for your purchase of the Rope-O-Matic.